Welcome to the Refined Sisterhood podcast, friend. We are Maddie and Kay, and our hearts are to rally around you, celebrate your season, and encourage you as you lean into the calling that the Lord has for you.
We share biblical encouragement, tangible advice, and lots of real life as we grow closer to Jesus. We want to be a safe space that you leave feeling loved, cared for, and served.
So grab your coffee, have a notebook handy, and let's hang out and indulge in some joyful conversations.
Hello, friends. Welcome back to the podcast. We are so excited for today because we have a super cool guest, and I'm excited to hear more about her, hear more about her story, all the things. And so, Maddie, will you introduce her?
Yes, we are pumped. So our guest today is Spencer Veazey, a Georgia native known for infusing her writing with relatable and uproarious storytelling coupled with profound truths about Jesus. She lives in Nashville, Tennessee with her cat Confetti, which is so cute, and is the engagement manager for Daystar Counseling Ministries. Mary Spencer is a proud graduate of both Auburn University and Belmont University. So, hello, Mary Spencer.
I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes, ma'am. We are so pumped. So, we're just going to let you have the floor. We are just really excited to hear your testimony, hear a little bit about who you are, what the Lord's done in your life, where He's brought you. And so we're just going to let you have the floor.
Yeah, let's do it. Okay, so to start from the beginning, I'm from South Georgia, like you said, and grew up in a small town, went to high school with 55 kids in my graduating class. So super small. Yes.
Yeah.
Very, very small. And then decided to go to Auburn, where I knew no one for college, which was quite the plot twist. They make it look really glamorous in the movies, like, oh, it'll be so fun to be the new girl and be mysterious. And it was not at all like that. But I grew up in the church. I've always known who Jesus was and believed in Him from a young age. But until I got to college, where I knew no one and got to my lowest point, I don't feel like I fully understood what it meant to have a relationship with Him. Mm-hmm. So I vividly remember being in my car. I think it was probably 3 or 4 weeks into my freshman year, and I had gotten dropped from pretty much every sorority during rush, didn't have any friends, and I was like, God, what are we doing here? I felt like this is where I was supposed to go, but this feels all wrong, and are you actually listening to me? Do you care about me? Do you care about the joy that I want to have that you say that you can fill me with? So I feel like when I got to the bottom of myself is when I really began to know the Lord. So after that happened, I got really plugged in with the church in Auburn and started really knowing the Lord for who He says He is in the Bible and having that actual relationship with Him. Growing up in the Bible Belt, everyone's kind of culturally a Christian. So I felt like, okay, this is actually something that I'm bought in on, not just because everybody else is, but because I see a difference in my life because of what Jesus has done for me. So that's where our relationship began. And then I went through Auburn, had a great experience. It was so much fun. And then I decided, okay, I'm going to move to another city where I know no one. Don't know why I keep doing this, but I moved to Nashville, went to grad school at Belmont. And after 6 months of being here, the world shuts down, COVID happens. I'm like, okay, so I have no friends really here, and the world shut down, and I'm in grad school. What are we doing, God? Is this actually the right thing? How do I make friends in the real world when there's not all these clubs and sororities and classes to meet people in? So what I did in college to make friends was I would literally go up to strangers at Auburn and be like, hey, would you want to grab lunch with me? For 16 weeks, my second semester, I got lunch with a stranger every single week. And a lot of them became my best friends. I was in a bunch of their weddings. And some of them I never really saw again, and that was okay. Not everybody's your best friend. But when I was in Nashville, I was like, okay, I guess I got to do that again. And I'm really going to have to scrounge around to meet some people because the world shut down and I don't have classes and things like I used to meet people. So I would talk to people in coffee shops, get coffee with the baristas, whoever I could find to meet people. And it takes a long time to build community, especially among believers when you move to a new city and you're like, I don't even know where I want to go to church. Mm-hmm. There's so many options. Growing up in my hometown, there's probably 4 or 5 main churches that people go to. Same with Auburn. And then I get to Nashville and it's like, whoa, there are hundreds of churches. Where do I kind of fit into this puzzle? So it took me a long time to get plugged in too, especially with COVID happening. But I found a local church here, and it was interesting. I was talking about this with a friend recently, but I thought I would see more friends from high school to college walk away from their faith, but I really saw the switch more so from college to going into adulthood.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, especially being in the South, it felt like I think people still did in college for the most part, go to church, go through the motions. And then when we graduated, people went everywhere. And it was like, oh, wow, I don't know if this is important to people anymore. So that's been fascinating. And especially after COVID, I feel like a lot of people are like, I'll just watch church online. I don't need to be bought in a local church. But I really wanted that. I wanted to be in person with believers and find small groups and things like that. So I got plugged into church in Nashville and have fallen in love with the local church. And it's made such a difference in my life being in person with other believers, being with like-minded people, giving back in my church. But yeah, it's hard going from college to adulthood because it's like, okay, I had friends that graduated and they got married the next Saturday. And I had friends that moved to New York and are working in the fashion industry. There's just so many different polar opposites. For a while, it was like, okay, we're all on the same timeline. We go from high school to college, and now it's like, okay, what do we do? So I've always loved to write, and that was always kind of therapeutic for me growing up, but it was something that I was like, I'm not going to ever share this with anybody. This is really private. I don't know. But I had some friends encourage me to write on a blog, and so I started writing on a blog throughout college. And then the end of my senior year, I was like, guys, what are we doing? We're all graduating. We're all doing different things. What's about to happen? And I would write down these different stories from our senior year. And my friends were like, you need to turn this into a book. And I was like, not going to happen. I don't know about that. That feels like something, I don't know, people that are famous do. And I'm just a girl. Like, what in the world? So I wrote down all the stories anyway. And flash forward to, I guess, about 2 or 3 years ago. This publishing company had just started and they were taking new authors, and I was like, I'll just submit this idea that me and my friends kind of talked about how after college it's so hard navigating your 20s and what do we even do as Christians. And 3 days after I submitted it, they were like, we'd love to publish your book. And I was like, me? Like, have you looked me up? Yeah, so it was kind of a whirlwind. I did not at all expect that to happen. And I then published last year a book called Cul-de-sac Crossroads. And it's all about, I grew up at the end of a cul-de-sac, and people would always be like, you live at the end of the street, the dead end. And that felt like such a negative connotation of the word to me. I felt like at the end of the street is where my life began. And so throughout the book, I talk about how God reroutes us in cul-de-sacs to new directions. And so that's kind of how it all began. But yeah, it's been such a journey in adulthood figuring out what my relationship looks like with the Lord, just between him and I, and not with anybody else involved in that. So it's definitely a journey, but it's been really cool. It's really deepened my faith, being so disconnected from people for a little bit, trying to figure out new cities, and then going, okay, I can only rely on the Lord for things like this.
That's so cool. I love the idea of your book, The Cul-de-sac. When you're talking about like making new friends in college and stuff, I remember me and my best friend from college, we always laugh because we were sitting in our English class and I like randomly asked her, hey, do you like softball? Like that was how our friendship started.
Really?
Like, do you like softball? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, do you want to play co-ed softball? Like on the softball team or whatever? And so that's literally, and then after that, I think I always call it our first friend date. Like we went to the mall together. I texted her and was like, hey, do you want to go to the mall with me? Because when I went to college, my boyfriend was there, but as far as girls, like I didn't have any close girlfriends. And so it was really funny because I knew the Lord put her in my life 100%, and that was really cool. But in that season of life, it is really so hard to make friends. And something that Maddie and I have talked about so many times is like, would every season change? Like you said, like going from high school to college, and then going from college to the real world. And then even like when we got married and like we had to choose a new church and like starting new friendships, like there's so many different seasons of life where like the Lord suddenly like reroutes you and you're like, okay, crap, like where do I go? I need friends. I don't want to be lonely. Like, what do we do? And so I resonate so much. I obviously didn't move to like a bunch of new towns on my own, which I think is so cool, so bold. Like, I commend you for that. I think that is so cool. But like, I love the cul-de-sac, how it like reroutes you, because that's so true. Like that is what the Lord does.
Yeah.
I know. It really, like hearing both of y'all talk, it's funny. We were in college a hot minute ago, but it's funny
We're old.
to look back to that and like just how we made friends. Like how you would just ask strangers, like,
Yep.
"Do you want to get coffee?" Like me and my roommate, I didn't know her, but I cheered in college, and she. Like, I remember this summer we had to go for cheer tryouts, and we go to cheer tryouts, and they're like, all right, pick your roommates. And we walk in, and we were like, I look at her, and she looks at me, she's like, do you want to be my roommate? And I was like, yeah. And, like, just looking back, like, how you ask somebody if they like softball, like, it's hilarious. Like, you're really out there just trying to be like, I gotta make friends. Like, I can't be here. But it's hilarious.
That's so funny. Yeah, I had a friend like that in college. It's so weird because it feels so vulnerable to be like, hey, you look like a really cool girl. Do you want to be my roommate? You want to be my friend? But I had a friend like that my freshman year. You know, I was just trying to make friends, and I had a friend in my sorority that was from Texas, and we were both like, we don't know what we're doing. We are out of our element here. And we like kind of scouted out our class, and we were like, that girl Sarah seems like a really nice person. Let's corner her after class and be like, you want to be friends with us, please? And yeah, we cornered her, and she was like, okay, sure. And then she ended up being one of my best friends. I was in her wedding, but it was just funny because people are like scared to, you know, get out of their comfort zone and be like, hey, do you want to be friends? But you feel so flattered when somebody does that, and you're like, okay, that's so nice. And everybody's kind of looking for friendships, even if you have tons of friends and have a great friend group. I feel like I'm always like, okay, who else could the Lord bring into my life? So I love that. That's hilarious.
Yeah. I mean, like, we all desire community because we're called to it. And so, and also, Kaitlin and I just were talking about this the other day about, like, people just want to be seen.
Yeah.
They just want to be, like, known and loved and seen. And so, yeah, I think it's so cool what you are about and, like, your story, your book, like, wow, I didn't even know your book was about that until, like, you just hinted about what it was about, and I was like, wait, I've never thought about a cul-de-sac like that. Like, I lived in a cul-de-sac, and I remember my parents, like, they desired the cul-de-sac. Like, when we built the house, they were like, we want to be in the cul-de-sac for, like, the kids to play. It's safer. Like, but it's so funny. I've never thought about it, like, what you just said. So that is so cool. And so, also, you said something earlier too about how you saw people walk away more from the Lord when they graduated, and this is a conversation we have had because I think when you are on your own, especially when you grew up in the Bible Belt, like you said, like it's just our culture here, kind of, and so you grow up in it, and you're like you believe what you're taught, but you don't really know why you believe what you believe, or really you get older and you're like, okay, like what do I believe? Like let's relearn, let's unlearn, like we got to figure this out. And so in your, like when you graduate college and you have to start making these decisions on your own, and like you have to get a job, and you have to like we did, we got married and had kids, and
suddenly you're looking for like purpose in life, because I feel like in college you're just experimenting with everything, like you're just trying new things, and you're so distracted by all the fun and the newness and the difference and all this stuff. And then when you like go out and you have to actually like get a job and do adulting, you're like, okay, so what's the purpose of being here?
Who am I? What am I doing? Where's my identity? And like when you get to that place, like in your after graduation, like it's easy to be like, that's a lot of work. Like I'm done with that. Like I don't even want to have to unlearn all that and relearn and figure out what anything means. Like I'm just gonna like go the other way, because it's hard to like start re-diving in and be like, all right, let me figure out why I believe what I believe. And also just to like know where your identity is, because if your identity, we were just on a podcast talking about this, like if your identity is in the job you thought you were going to get, girl, you're probably not. Like you're going to get knocked down. If your identity is in your plan, you're probably going to get knocked down. And so just knowing like how to embrace that identity in Christ to thrive in your 20s and 30s. And I think this is something that you we're wanting to speak on. So I'm going to let you have the
Yeah. So in the beginning of my book, I talk about, the book's broken down into 3 sections. And something that I've learned a lot as I've gone along my 20s, I'm 28 now, is that without knowing whose I am, I don't know who I am, because we all have our identity placed in something, whether it's a job or the Lord or a relationship or our kids, whatever it is. there's something that we place on a pedestal, and until we figure out what that is, we don't really know who we are. And I've seen a lot of friends get these like super what they thought would be glamorous jobs, high paying jobs, working 80-hour weeks. And then when that gets stripped away, when layoffs happen, or when they go, okay, I'm about to have a mental breakdown because this job is so hard, they're like, I don't actually even know what I care about. Like, that's what my identity has been. So I think it's so important to know whose we are before we can figure out, what do I actually like to do for fun, for work? What actually matters? Does it matter that I make tons of money, or am I okay with making a livable wage and enjoying my life and getting to be a part of a community and filling myself up with other ways? So throughout the book, I talk about that, but I don't think I realized how important that was until I graduated from college. And throughout all of college, I knew that the Lord was a really important part of my life and my story, but I don't know if he was on the actual pedestal of my life, and that changes all the time. I mean, even the past couple of weeks, I've been like, what have I really focused on? I've been on social media a lot, and that's kind of been the pedestal that I've had. So I think it's really important to figure that out before anything else. And I think it's so important to have mentors in your life that can kind of steward that and go, okay, can I call that out in your life? You're really putting your boyfriend above everything. You're really putting these friendships or your job above everything. Do you think that's what you want your life to look like? And some of my friends that have walked away from the faith have seen a lot of misinformation about Jesus. The Jesus that they know is not the same Jesus that I know. And it's hard when, especially we're in such a polarized world, when you see somebody that is a believer that thinks differently than you, it's so hard to go, okay, is that what God says, or is that just the opinions of a Christian person in a broken world?
Yep.
How do we kind of navigate that? And I think that's something that we're all kind of trying to steward, especially after elections and everything that's going on in the world.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like that's been hard for a lot of my friends that have walked away, to be able to separate what the brokenness of the world and the brokenness of Christians and people in general versus who Jesus actually is. And I have never read through the Bible in its entirety before, but I've been going through the Bible recaps plan. I don't know if y'all are familiar, but I started it last January and I'm really behind, but I'm still like slowly chugging along. And I'm almost through the Old Testament, and the Jesus that I'm learning about and the God that I'm learning about is not the same one that I've seen on social media and that I've seen on Reels and TikToks and things like that. Like, he's so much deeper than that. And something that I've really seen over and over, especially in the Old Testament, is that his steadfast love endures forever through everything, through every trial, and how he goes back and redeems his people over and over and over. These people in Exodus and Leviticus and Judges are doing these awful, awful, awful things, yet he never gives up. He always is going back and redeeming them after all of this. And I keep thinking, why do you keep doing that, God? Why do you keep going back for these people when they're being so vicious and angry and doing awful things? And then I'm like, oh, he's doing that for me constantly. He's going back and fighting for me over and over and over. And my sin looks different than their sin, but it's still sin. So anyways, that's a long-winded way of saying that I think it's really important to be a part of a local church, have mentors to be able to call that out in your life, and to be able to ask questions too, because I don't have all the answers. I'm still kind of like going through the Bible thinking, I don't know what this means. What in the world is happening? It's kind of crazy that we believe this stuff, but I've seen the Lord's goodness in my life, and I trust that he is who he says he is, and that I'm not going to have all the answers. And I also think it's super, super important when you get plugged into a local church to give back, to volunteer in some capacity, because you're getting to see so many different sides of the community that you're in. So at my church in Nashville, Midtown Fellowship, I volunteer with the youth group, and this is the first year that I'm doing it. And it's been life-changing for me, because getting to be connected with families in my church, because a lot of people in my church are in their 20s, 30s, but getting to be with a generation a little bit older than me has been so awesome. And a generation younger, I'm with 6th graders, and they have the craziest questions. We're going through as a church last semester, Judges, and so we went through that with the 6th graders, and they would ask questions, and I'd be like, you know what? I have no clue what's happening here. I'll be so honest. Like, I don't know how to help you, but I'm really trying. Like, I'm going to show up weekly and be here with you in it. But just learning from them has been really fascinating. And to be able to go back and be like, look at their childlike faith. Like, I want to reclaim that in my life, because I've seen so much brokenness that they haven't seen yet. and they're so in love with the Lord, and I want to feel that way again like they do. But even if it's just greeting at the front door or leading a small group, anything, just being a part of the church and giving back in some capacity, I think is really, really important.
For sure.
Yeah, for sure. And I think too, like when you think like giving back is for other people, and that so many times it is also for yourself and for the Lord to like show you new things about yourself.
Yeah.
I also serve with our 4th and 5th graders, so I get the questions. I get, like, I went into it because I was like, all right, I got to pick somewhere to serve. Let me do kids. I really wanted to do youth, but, like, we got little kids. So I couldn't do youth. So I was like, let me do the closest thing to youth. And so I picked 4th and 5th grade. And the Lord has taught me so much about myself, about, like, just by their innocence. And just, even, like, with my own kids, like, just like you said, their childlike faith, like they haven't been exposed to so much of this brokenness in the world, and so all they know is a love so deep with the Father, and like that's what's at the forefront of their mind, and they're also just getting what we are telling them, and they're just like absorbing it. They're little sponges, and it's so cool to see it. And yes, like I'm teaching them, but in return, the Lord is teaching me so much about my heart, myself, about even like when I'm teaching on Sundays, like different Bible stories, like putting it in the simplest of terms for them teaches me something so much. Like I don't know, like even reading my kids' their little kid Bible, I'm like, Lord, I never do it like that.
Like that. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
So it's so important, like to get plugged in to a church, to start pouring in and volunteering. Because it's not just for other people. Yes, it is, but it's also like for the Lord to teach you something about yourself. So that is so cool.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it, and I think something that I've loved about volunteering is it's helped me to be less like self-centered. I'm like, okay, I've got to pour out to others. I can't constantly think about myself. And as a society, we're constantly thinking about ourselves. We're thinking about our next moves and what we're gonna do, and me, and being a part of the youth group and just volunteering in general, wherever you are, even if it's not at your church, helps you go, okay, let me think outside of myself, how I can help other people with the gifts that I've been given. And I work for a nonprofit, so volunteers are so important, and we're so grateful for them. And I've seen the impact of volunteering. But yeah, I learned so much from kids because they ask such good questions, and I think I've gotten kind of to the point where I'm like, I believe in Jesus, and some of this I'm just going to gloss over when I read it in the Bible, and they don't do that. They're like, no, what is actually happening here? And why are you reading this? And in my group, actually, our head pastor, his daughter's in my group, and she knows more about the Bible than I do, and so I'm always like, Esther, what's going on here, girl? Tell us what's happening. I don't know. You may be in the
help us out.
You're in charge now. Yeah, so it's so cool to learn from them because they just believe wholeheartedly. And there's some days where I'm like, God, is this actually true? This is wild. And I've read this book called What If It's True by Charles Martin. Have y'all ever read that or heard of it? It's, oh my gosh, it's incredible. It's like a storytelling version of the life of Jesus. And it's completely changed my life. But I don't think I fully grasped the story of Jesus before that. I think it's similar to The Chosen. If y'all watch that show, it's like, when you watch this playing out, you're like, oh, this feels different than just reading the words on the page over and over. And it shifted my relationship with the Lord so much because I've been like, oh no, he was actually here, and this isn't just a parable or story. This was real life, and it's just cool to think about Jesus in that way, being somebody that was around our age, having such an impactful ministry, and seeing who he surrounded himself with. He wasn't with the highest of the high, the richest of the rich. He was with the lowly that really wanted him. I think about the woman that touched Jesus' cloak and was instantly healed. I just am like, that's the Jesus that I know, and that's not the Jesus that the people around me always know, especially my friends that have walked away from their faith. But I used to work for an addiction treatment center that was faith-based, and it was for women going through treatment for alcohol or drug abuse. And before I worked there, I didn't fully understand how that all worked. Was it a disease? What did that all mean? And getting to be with them, a lot of the women came from homelessness. I was like, Jesus would have been with you guys. Like, you have such faith in the Lord that he's going to redeem your story. And I'm just kind of walking around every day being like, oh, this is my life. I'm so, like, I've built this life for myself. I'm not at all like, the Lord has built this life for me. And y'all are like, no, I've been brought to the lowest of lows, and Jesus is here with me, and I know that I'm going to beat this. And it was really, it changed my life walking with them, because they've walked through a lot of things that we'll never experience, but the Lord was with them in that, and they had such faith. And so that really sharpened my faith to be like, wow, the Lord is moving in all different stories. And if he was here, if Jesus was here, he would have been with y'all. So anyways, that's a long-winded way of answering. I don't even know what question we're on.
No, it's good. That was so good. I want to, you mentioned your book at the beginning.
Yeah.
And I want you to tell us a little bit about your book and like the heart behind it, and just maybe a little bit about it. Just, I want to know more. I mean, I'm excited because of what you said earlier.
Yeah. So when I submitted the book proposal to my publisher, I really, I had kind of already written it out, but I got an email about submitting it 30 minutes before it was due, and I was like, well, I'm just going to write a few things down and then submit it, and we'll see what they go with. And it's funny to see how it kind of changed throughout. I don't even know if I've talked to anybody publicly about this, but originally it was going to be called 22 and Not a Clue, and then it changed to Discover Delight, and then I was like, that feels a little cheesy, I don't know. And then it changed to Cul-de-sac Crossroads, and they were like, you really need to niche down. Like, it can't just be this broad book for everybody. Like, it's got to have a target audience. So I was like, well, I'm in my 20s. This is what I'm experiencing, so it'll be targeted for women in their 20s and 30s, but it's really for all ages. I've had women in their 70s read it and be like, I learned a lot from this. Thank you for writing this. But yeah, which is so sweet. I'm like, thank you for reading. It's all about my experience in my 20s, and I feel like I read a lot of Christian books. I'm like, this is really good, but it's not always super relatable to me. I'm like, I need a little bit of humor. Like, Jesus was really funny, and sarcastic. I've got a little bit of that going on too. Like, I'm going to infuse that in my writing. And so I tell all these different stories, and one of my favorite authors is Bob Goff, and he talks about, he's the best. I want to be as joyful as he is. He lives such a full life. And I took a writing course with him, and he talked about, if you don't get out and live life, you don't have anything to write about. You've got to go live a full life to be able to write about a full life. So a lot of my stories are about my different experiences, and the one that's coming to mind right now. So whenever, it's right when I got the book deal, so I guess maybe 2 years ago, I was so sick of the way dating culture is for Christians. It's like, where are we? What's happening? Why do we have to just always go to the dating apps? They can be used for good, for sure, but why are people not setting people up anymore? So my friends, I sent them a form, and I was like, can you guys fill this out? I want to know what you're looking for. I want to be a better friend of setting people up and knowing what you're interested in and actually caring about that. So I sent it to some friends, and I talk about this in the book some, but they filled it out. And then all of a sudden people started filling it out that I didn't know. And I was like, hello, who are these people? And my friends had started sending it to their friends. I guess they had thought that I was opening a matchmaking business. It was really just for my friends. And then overnight I had 200 responses, and I was like, I've accidentally done something here. I was just trying to look up my friends. Yes, it was crazy. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm about to be a matchmaker. I didn't mean to, but I will do it. I will do this for the Lord's people. So yeah, I set up, over 100 people on dates, and I was like, okay, I want to encourage women and men that there are good people out there. There's this kind of facade of, there's no good men left. There's no good men left. And it's definitely a harder culture to date in, especially as you get older, but there are good people left. You just kind of have to search a little bit harder than I think you used to, especially with social media. It's like we're such a more isolated culture. People aren't just going up to other people in coffee shops and being like, hey, I'd like to get to know you. I mean, that would be nice, but that's just not the world that we're in, or at least that I'm in. So I set people up on dates, and I guess I'm not a very good matchmaker because no one's gotten married yet, but I'm still hopeful. I just think it's important to look out for our friends and set them up. And anyway, so I talk about that in the book. But Another thing I talk about in the book is prayer life. And that's something that I really struggled with as a believer, because growing up, it felt like, okay, we pray at church. We pray before dinner, lunch, breakfast. But other than that, like, do I pray just by myself? And do I always have to have my eyes closed? And what does this even mean? And I didn't realize that it's just talking to God, like you're talking to a friend. And as I've gotten older, I'm really bad about being like, okay, thanks for answering my prayer request, God. On to the next. Like, or did you even answer it? I don't really know, because I'm already 10 steps ahead of you. So I don't even know where I got this idea from, but I was like, I really want to be good about remembering the ways that the Lord answers my prayers, whether it's a no, yes, whatever it is. So I've got a wall in my room that has all these different sticky notes on it, and I'll put down prayer requests. So if a friend or my friend's mom has cancer, all right, I hope that you will heal my friend's mom. And then I'll put the date, and then when that prayer request is answered, I put another sticky note that says, okay, she's been healed from cancer. It has to be something tangible that I can actually see the Lord answer. And it's been really cool to watch the sticky notes kind of pile up with prayers that have been or answered prayers. And I've needed that, because I'm quick to go, God's not listening. God doesn't care. God doesn't care about any of this. But when I look at my wall of all these answered prayer requests, I'm like, no, he really cares, and he has moved in so many incredible ways in healing in different relationships and friendships that I didn't expect to actually get answered. And there's still sticky notes that have been up for years that I'm like, I don't know if this is ever going to get answered, but I'm going to keep praying, and I need that tangible reminder of like, okay, here's my wall of things that I'm praying for, because I'm just bad at prayer. That's not something that naturally comes to me, and I'm really bad about sitting in silence with the Lord. At my last job, we got a half day of prayer every 6 months, and you would go off campus and pray for 4 hours. And the first time that I did it, I was like, hello, how do you pray for 4 hours? I don't know how to do that. What am I going to do for this long? So I did what anybody else would do. I just Googled it, and I was like, God, what are we going to do for 4 hours? So I found this wheel chart that has different like prayers that you can have. It's like in 5-minute increments for an hour. And I was like, I guess I'll just do this 4 times. I don't know. And I've never prayed that long before. Maybe the longest I've ever prayed before that was 15 minutes. So I go to this park in Nashville, and I'm like, okay, God, here we go. Let's see what happens. And it was such a life-changing day, because I'm not good at sitting in silence. I like to move. I'm an extrovert. I do a lot of talking, but I don't do a lot of listening with the Lord. And I really felt his presence that day, and it reminded me so much of like, okay, if you will just be still, I can speak, and I want to speak to you, but you've got to be willing to listen. And I'm trying to get better about prayer. That's definitely something that's always going to be kind of a struggle for me, I think. But I really do feel the Lord's presence in a way that I don't otherwise when I'm actually talking to him and listening in return. That is just hard to do. But yeah, those are a few things from the book that I talk about. I just talk about a lot of my different experiences in my 20s.
I love that so much. I love the prayer one. I know in the last few years, my prayer life has definitely, like, I've learned a lot about prayer. The Lord has taught me so much, and like I've tried to practice different types of prayer, and like especially like contemplative prayer, like sitting with the Lord and like letting him speak instead of me speaking. I know it's so hard sometimes. Like I wake up in the morning, or like I get a moment during nap time or whatever, and I'm like, all right, Lord, let's do this. Like, I'm ready to listen. But then I have like 15,000 things come to my brain, and I'm like, okay, how do I like not think about these things when I'm trying to listen to the Lord? That's what's like so hard about it. But I've learned, usually if things come to my mind, I'm like, all right, Lord, if it's like a distraction, I'm like, Lord, take it away. Or if it's like something that I can pray about, I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm going to take a minute. I'm going to pray about it. And then I'm just going to like take a break, and I'm going to listen again. Yeah. And so I feel like it's such a good way, like for us, like when we step aside and we take like longer time to pray, it takes away like the, I guess the traditional praying, like how you're just like, dear Lord, thank you for this day. Like, thank you for waking me up this morning. I pray that you would like, you know, take this situation away from me or help me have strength through this. Oh, and by the way, thank you for Jesus, and thank you for being good and your grace and your mercy. I'm laughing because like this is what I pray with my kids every morning, because like simple terms, like this is what we pray every day. But it takes away like while that is still good prayer, like it gives you a chance to sit with the Lord and pray differently, and to recognize that praying is not just asking, and praying is not just like, I don't know, it's not just something where it's like, it's not transactional. It's like something where we get to be with him and build and strengthen our relationship with him. Yeah. And so, yeah, I love your sticky note method. That's so cool.
Thank you. Yeah.
I do something very similar. I have, it's not sticky notes, but I do love that idea because it's like an everyday reminder that you get to see. I have an album on my phone called Answered Prayers, and anytime someone like sends me something where I know I've been praying for it, I'll screenshot it and like put it in there. Or if I see it, or like if someone like sends me like a picture of their ultrasound that I've been praying for, and like I just put it in there, so it's cool to like look back. And I think it's super important because a lot of times you don't even like, it goes past us. We don't even realize that the Lord's answered. Yeah. And if you're not paying attention to what you're praying and how the Lord is being so faithful in those prayers, like it's so easy to just see it go past us. And then but being aware of what you're praying and how he's answering it, and how maybe he isn't answering it right now, but not figuring out, but like paying attention to maybe why he's not answering those prayers. Yeah. When we're doing that, it grows our faith. And so it's so cool. So I love that you do that.
I also love your matchmaking business. Yeah, that's insane.
It was so much fun. I was like, I didn't mean to be here, but I'm just gonna roll with it, I guess. And I eventually had to be like, okay, I have a full-time job and I'm writing a book, so I can't do this anymore. But wish y'all well.
Like, are y'all gonna pay me for this, or like it's a subscription? Like, what are we doing here?
Yes, I know. I was like, I could have a full-time business doing this, but I don't have time. But yeah, it was encouraging to be like, look at all these amazing people that are out there that are from all over. Like, it's gonna be okay. The Lord's gonna bring the right person when it's the right time. But it is hard when you watch so many of your friends get what you think you want, get the marriage, get the kids, and you're like, okay, is that gonna happen for me? Like, I want that. But something I've been talking with my friends a lot about is there's this mentality in society that's like the single versus the married, and you know, can you still be friends when your friends are moving in different life stages than you? And something that I found is A, yes, we can still all be friends. But B is that I want to show up in their life stages with them. So my friends that have had kids, if they're super busy, I'm just going to go over, and while my friend's doing their kids' laundry, I'm just going to sit with them and catch up. And then I'm still going to invite them to come to things and get drinks and things like that, because there's no reason for it to be us versus them. Like, we're all a part of this amazing community. There's no reason for that to be the mentality. But I mean, things change as life changes, but I don't want to be like, oh, but just because they're in a different place than I am doesn't mean that we can't hang out. I just gotta maybe change the way that we hang out and go to their house and help change diapers and just show up where they are in this time. But yeah, I think it can be kind of like, well, there goes another friend to marriage. I guess, you know, we won't see her as much. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, okay, to wrap up the podcast, I want to know, we've talked a lot about like thriving in your 20s and 30s. If there's like one piece of advice you would offer to a woman in their 20s or 30s that is in a very similar season of life that you've been in, what is like one piece of advice to give them?
Well, that's a good question. I would say what the world wants versus what the Lord wants are often two very different things. And what the Lord wants for your life could feel a lot less glamorous, but is actually so much more impactful. Do what you feel called to, not what the world's calling you to. So if you feel called, like I wanted to work in a big corporation and make lots of money, I have my MBA, and then I all of a sudden was working for a nonprofit, and I was like, oh, okay, I guess I'm going to be poor forever. Thanks, God. But it has been so much more fulfilling to be a part of what the Lord's called me to rather than what feels like the next right move, to move up the corporate ladder or to move up the relational ladders or friendship ladders. It's easy to compare on social media and go, oh, I want the life they have. And then we don't know what's going on behind closed doors or behind the screens. So I would say show up fully as yourself, not the way that you think everybody wants to perceive you and wants you to show up as. Be who you feel fully called to in the Lord.
That is so good. Mary Spencer, thank you so much for your words of wisdom, for just your heart. I can like see that your heart is for Jesus. It's for people, and I'm excited to read your book. Like I'm gonna order it, and I'm gonna get it. I'm really excited. I feel like, and it's like you said, it's for any woman in any season because like the Lord reroutes us so often, and like a lot of times when we don't expect it, sometimes when we do expect it, sometimes in ways that we want, and then sometimes in ways that we don't want. And I feel like it would be just beneficial for like any woman in any season to read. And so I'm really excited about it. But before we go, would you pray for us?
I would love to. Okay. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this time together to talk about you and your word and who you call us to be, Lord. I pray for the woman that's listening that feels like she's hit a dead end and doesn't know where to begin again. I pray that she'll feel rerouted in who you've called her to be and who she is and what she's meant for, Lord. I pray that as we're just fed so much information constantly from our phones and the world, that we'll be able to see the truth and who you've called all of us to be and be plugged more into who you are. I pray that you'll give us the strength and the hope to get through each day and to see that you've called us to live a fully lived life. I thank you for what you're doing in each of our lives. And I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you again for being here, and just know that we're proud of you, and you're doing really big things for the kingdom. So
thank you.
Keep going. You're doing awesome. And before we go, we want to know how people, or tell all people how they can find you, how they can buy your book. Is it out yet? The new one?
Yeah, it's out.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, tell them how they can find you, social media, all the things.
Yeah. So I'm on Instagram, Facebook, all the things at Spencer Veazey, MENCERVZ. Feel free to DM me. I love new friends, clearly. The book's on every platform, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, Amazon is usually the most popular for people. Cul-de-sac Crossroads, all about navigating life as a Christian in this day and age.
Love it. Well, thank you so much again for being on the podcast, for sharing your heart with us, and for encouraging the girls who are listening, because I know that they're going to walk away so encouraged from this. Girls, we post new episodes every Wednesday, so we will see you again next week. If you need prayer, if you need, if you just want to chat, if you need advice, our DMs are always open. And yeah, go buy Mary Spencer's book because it sounds amazing. And yeah, we will see you guys next week. Bye.
Bye.
It is such a joy getting to hang out with you, and we hope that you leave this episode feeling encouraged, loved, and full of purpose. If you enjoyed today's little chat, we would love it if you would write us a review so that we can hear how we encouraged you. And if you haven't clicked the follow button, go do that right now. Also, you can join the sisterhood by finding us on Instagram at The Refined Sisterhood. Okay, friends, we hope you have the best day and can't wait for another deep conversation with you next week.